providers. You're reducing supply, increasing demand. That doesn't lower the cost curve. That increases the cost curve.
Well, so again, just to stay on healthcare, lots of big issues, and I know you want to talk about some of the facts. But do you aspire to live in a country where we have universal health care? Is that a goal of yours?
What I aspire is to health care being governed more by a free market competitive system. I always use the example of one area of healthcare that generally isn't covered by a third-party payer or by governments. It's eyeglasses. The free market has actually produced businesses that you can walk off the street, get eyeglasses in an hour, 2 for the price of 1, and take a look at the quality of laser surgery. It's gone up, and the price has gone down the last 10 years. But the free market system is a marvel in terms of guaranteeing the lowest possible price and cost, the highest possible level of quality and customer service. But we're moving in the opposite direction with government control.
Yes or no, do you aspire for the United States to have universal health care coverage for everyone?
I want everybody to be able to access health care, affordable health care, but you do that through the free market, not through government control. We've moved in the wrong direction that way.
What do you do about people looking for eyeglasses who just can't afford eyeglasses?
Yeah, well, listen, we are a compassionate society. We want a strong social safety net. But, Mike, the problem is, how do you design that strong social safety net without incentivizing people to take advantage of it that really shouldn't be taking advantage of it? I mean, when you've gone from about 17 million people on food stamps in the year 2000 to 47 million in 12 years later, I think you have a problem, particularly when you're running deficits. Over the last 4 years, $5.1 trillion. Do you know what we're doing to our children? Here's the point I was trying to make.
But look who was in office most of the time.
They would willingly drive up their debt, max out their credit cards, never intending to pay it off, just dump that off on their kids and grandkids. And yet, collectively, that is exactly what we're doing to our children. I mean, it's utterly immoral. We have to come to terms with that. We've got to start reforming these promises, these programs we've made to people, try and honor them, but recognize that we don't have the capability of paying for them without bankrupting or mortgaging our children's future.
One of the things I always wonder about when we talk about the deficit, why don't we hear more about how to grow, solutions for growth? Because if you think about history, it's not so much the size of the debt, it's how fast you're growing. In the Clinton era, we grew out of debt. We grew faster. There were policies in place that I think helped foster that. What can we do now to get out of the 2% economy?
Well, first of all, you don't increase taxes on small to medium-sized business people. Everything we should do in Washington, I agree totally, should be targeted toward economic growth.
Everything
and just a couple
falsely
numbers.
And
even
just
with
keep that definition,
the meager economic growth we've had from 2009 to 2012,
that did not hit
the federal government has increased by $344 billion
and medium business
per year. If we just return to a normal economy like we had in 2007, when the government collected about 18.5% of GDP in revenue, just a little bit more than the 50-year average, that would add another $435 billion per year. Mike, you were talking about repatriating those corporate earnings. $42 billion. The fiscal cliff deal will raise about $41 billion. That's a tenth of what we can get through economic growth. So, I totally agree.
On memorizing all this minutia of data and practicing and practicing to get up on TV and regurgitate it so that people are hanging on. This is the psychological bullshit that they're laying out, and people are eating it up.
That we're largely top down. We care more about the rich guy than we do the little guy. And my argument was that we have fundamentally.
Well, that's what Jeb Bush said the other day. He said that Obama pitted us against them,
and keeping that community-oriented growth from the
them
bottom
against
up.
us,
How do you
us being
respond
rich people over here in the Republican Party?
And the clamor about Republicans being out of touch and focus more on tax cuts for the rich, billionaires and millionaires, as opposed to what you just expressed here.
Obviously, I'm never talking about any tax cuts for the rich. We're not in a position where we can cut taxes. We're just trying not to penalize their success. But I am one of those small to medium-sized business people. I know the incentives of what makes me do things, what prevents me from doing things. But listen, I am concerned about every American. I think all of us share the same goal. We want a prosperous America. We want every American to be able to build a good life for themselves and their families. But you do that by making sure we have a robust economy so that people have the dignity of being able to get a job. And you don't have that when you just continue to grow government. You can get government jobs, but those aren't self-sustaining.
But off of former Chairman Steele's comments just now about messaging, you mentioned food stamps a few moments ago. If you've lost your job in the last 10 years, if you haven't received a raise in the last 8 years, and you've got 3 or 4 kids, and you're a middle-income family, food stamps, you're going to go to food stamps. I mean, that accounts for a huge percentage of the growth in food stamps, I would think. Why is it that a lot of Republicans choose to drop, like scratching a sore, food stamps instead of corporate profits overseas and dropping the hammer on those bastards?
Well, first of all, I am all for dramatic tax reform. When I had dinner with the president, my suggestion was rather than tinker around the edges, let's scrap the entire tax code. Let's start from a clean piece of paper, and let's build a tax code that raises the revenue we need and does no economic harm. But in terms of food stamps, you know, generally those
now they want him to start from scratch and rewrite the tax code rather than try to do some small fixes like what everybody else been doing all before.
Again, you know, I'm not saying let's not help those that need help. We want to help those folks, but what can we afford? We have to take an honest assessment of, you know, Social Security. Here's a little chart. You know, it drives me crazy when people say Social Security is solvent through the year 2035 or 2038. It's not. In the next 20 years, Social Security will pay out $5.1 trillion more in benefits than it takes in the payroll tax. This isn't a sustainable system. Medicare is worse. The liabilities in the federal government, you know, just Medicare, Social Security, our debt, and what we owe federal retirees is larger than the private net asset base in the United States. All assets held by small businesses, large businesses, and households. This is a problem. And so the other point I made to the president was if we're going to solve these problems, we have to build relationships. We have to build trust. But we have to agree on the numbers. And we have to spend a lot of time going, here are the facts. You know, facts don't lie. Let's spend a lot of time fleshing that out. Let's agree to that. And then, by the way, the president has a perfect platform to let the American people know the extent of the problem. One of the points he made is Americans pay $1 into Medicare, they get more than $3 out. That's a message only the president can really break through and let the American people know about.
You had a good meal and you didn't have to pay
you see how they're turning that around?
Senator Ron Johnson,
if you do that, say it that way.
Thanps, Senator.
Thank you.
I'm going to repeat that what that motherfucker said.
Americans, the percentage of Americans that are on food stamps range somewhere between 6 and 10%. We're up to about 15%. Something has gone off kilter here. And
you see that
again,
how
you know,
they've got all
I'm
the
not saying
numbers?
let's not help those that need help. We want to help those folks. But what can we afford? We have to take an honest assessment of, you know, Social Security. Here's a little chart. You know, it drives me crazy when people say Social Security is solvent through the year 2035 or 2038. It's not. In the next 20 years, Social Security will pay out $5.1 trillion more in benefits than it takes in the payroll tax. This isn't a sustainable system. Medicare is worse. The liabilities in the federal government, you know, just Medicare, Social Security, our debt, and what we owe federal retirees is larger than the private net asset base in the United States. All assets held by small businesses, large businesses, and households. This is a problem. And so the other point I made to the president was if we're going to solve these problems, we have to build relationships. We have to build trust. But we have to agree on the numbers. And we have to spend a lot of time going, here are the facts. You know, facts don't lie. Let's spend a lot of time fleshing that out. Let's agree to that. And then, by the way, the president has a perfect platform to let the American people know the extent of the problem. One of the points he made is Americans pay $1 into Medicare, they get more than $3 out. That's a message only the president can really break through and let the American people know about.
You had a good meal and you didn't have to pay for it.
Right. Senator Ron Johnson with a hopeful message for the President of the United States. Thanks, Senator.
Thank you.
Up next, former SNL stars reunite to welcome a new member into their elite club. That's next.
And
Morn Joe comes right
send
back.
out messages over the TV air, you know, to the president. Sit there sending messages, you know, I hope the president does this, you know, well, what the president should do. And oh, my God.
At the end of the day,
These
no matter where
people
you
are
come from, and no matter where you
horrible.
work, eventually
Now,
you
they
realize
get
that
together
someday you want to
and
retire. I know it
and
sounds
they
like a
pay
cliche that we help
experts
people,
to
but
come
we
up with
truly
all
help people.
this
And I love that about my job.
these numerical, you know, facts, quote unquote. And they memorize this shit.
Chicken is a heritage breed, woodland raised
And then
chicken that's been fed a diet of sheep's milk, soy,
come
and hazelnuts.
Okay, this is local?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to ask you just one more time, and it's local.
It is.
Is that USDA organic or Oregon organic or Portland organic?
It's just all across the board organic.
The hazelnuts, these are local?
How big is...
So here is the chicken you'll be enjoying tonight.
You have this information. This is fantastic.
Absolutely. His name was Colin. Here are his papers, okay?
That's great. He looks like a happy little guy who runs around. A lot of friends, other chickens as friends. Putting his little wing around another one and kind of like palling around.
I don't know that I can speak to that level of intimate knowledge about him. They do a lot to make sure that their chickens are very happy.
That's a clip from Portlandia.
Watch that show.
Oh, it's very funny. Very funny.